43% of the respondents in India said that there has been an increase in focus on security and threats. So what specifically entails AI-based security? How is it different from other types of cybersecurity needs?
So when you talk about the top business challenges in the security area, it is about complexity, Vignesh. Complexity coming from disparate resources, both on-site as well as cloud resources. When you start putting them together, there is a level of lack of visibility, and this is across the environment. And there is a sense of unclear ownership. This is essentially creating the blind spots. When you talk about perceived ownership confusion, depending on who you talk to in the organization, the ownership of the cloud may vary, or the environment, including that of cloud, can vary anywhere from the platform teams to application teams and so on. So that's why you find 66% of the respondents that we surveyed said that they could rely on cloud providers for the baseline security. But the perception of security ownership, actually varies greatly across the platforms and applications. So therefore, if we don't manage this shared responsibility properly, it can easily create policy blind spots. Especially in the cloud area, the cloud bandwidth actually amplifies the attacks. So when you are talking about effect of attacks like crypto mining, DDoS, or while hosting criminal activities on cloud, they can always add a layer of smoke screen and kind of amplify the attack across multiple areas, right? And they are able to evade this whole detection very, very easily. Some of the threat actors, they have adopted malware, and what this does is, especially in cloud environments, they evade any standardized detection mechanisms or any cloud security products. They do not detect it quite easily. All the organizations that focused on improving security is, first of all, established a collaborative governance culture and adopt a unified strategy that combines both your environments, including that of cloud and security, and across all application developers, IT operations, essentially across the board.
52% said that limited expertise was a deterrent to AI adoption. So what are the steps that needs to be taken by the ecosystem and maybe the government as well to increase the skill sets, and how are players like as IBM doing that?
Yeah, very important question, Vignesh, because in the same survey that you are referring to, almost 1/3 of IT professionals say that their businesses are using AI, and close to about 43% of them say the company has actually accelerated, especially during the pandemic times. While these advances are happening, adoption advances are happening, both in terms of how people are kind of putting them to use in use cases, as well as in the technology itself, to make it kind of AI more accessible than ever. The lack of AI skills, as you rightly pointed out, and increasing data complexity are found out to be the most significant challenges in adoption. Now, to a large extent, the services that we have, like AI Factory, available through our expert labs and stuff like that, this is helping adoption of AI to overcome the skill gap. In other words, we augment the skills of the customers to go and deploy many of the use cases that they are talking about. But what is also interesting is the evolution in technology itself is bridging some of the gap. For example, there is a feature in IBM's data and AI offering, Cloud Pak for Data, and it is called Auto AI. Essentially, given a particular data set, this feature analyzes the data set and suggests the right set of algorithms to use on that data set. You had a very interesting corollary question there, and that's where I think I wanted to bring the skilling programs, right? In a slightly different, or related note, IBM is actually helping build the skill gap that you mentioned by bringing AI as part of the core school curriculum itself. School curriculum. And we have collaborated with CBSE to develop the curriculum on artificial intelligence. And this is introduced as an elective subject for class 9 to 12. We did the pilot project that was launched, part of the CBSE Seva project last year. And the aim was to reach out to 200 schools across 13 states in India.
At the start, you mentioned the two most important criteria for AI. That is, one is security and second is trust. So your study also pointed out biggest barriers to developing trusted AI. So I just wanted to understand how would IBM define trusted AI?
It's all about explaining the inferences that AI engine produces. Right? There are many organizations in the world and in different industry segments, and they are adopting AI at different stages. And if you go across the world and ask them what worries them most, 60% of the execs worry about the compliance standards, and that specifically around how can I trust AI. And therefore, the explainability brings that trust. How can I explain the inferences coming out of the AI engines? In fact, lack of explainable AI is cited one of the biggest barrier for large-scale adoption of AI. Today, trusted and open framework for AI has become sort of I would say, foundational design point for any of the AI solutions. At least in IBM, that is the story. Essentially, this continues to root around, I would say, the anchor points or ground rules of the purpose of AI is to augment human intelligence. That's number one. Second, data and insights coming out of the data analytics belong to the creator, not the people who produces the tools. Third, AI systems must be transparent and explainable. I explained you already, how you can trace back from the inference all the way to origination of the data. And last, apart from being fair, AI must be accountable and provide necessary security as part of its framework. So that, since we are dealing with the data, you have to be super sensitive about people's privacy and the privileges that go with it.
From the ecosystem perspective, Subram, can you just talk a little bit about AI's inherent bias and how can bias be mitigated? What steps should be taken?
The goodness here is there is enough and more technology that has come up which allows you to check on the level of bias that the algorithm may have. See, ultimately, at the end of the day, an AI algorithm tend to behave with the training that it has been through, which means it has the data set that was used to train that algorithm. Now, if the bias is already present in the data, then you cannot blame the algorithm for that bias. Right? It is inherited bias. Therefore, to really understand the nature of the data, whether there is bias in there as well as the algorithm, there are tools that are available today. There is a level of transparency that you could bring in, which tells you, where the inference could have gone wrong. So all of this is going hand in hand.
So 50% of people who responded said that data silos are still a deterrent to AI adoption. And as you know, many enterprises in India still hold on to legacy systems and on-prem systems. And many say there's nothing actually wrong with that. How do you at IBM view this scenario?
Yeah. See, I think it's a very interesting question, by the way, because, data in silos, variety of data, structured versus unstructured, multiplicity of source systems. These are all common issues or complexities that all organizations face, especially those that want to deploy AI programs in scale. See, firstly, as I was explaining earlier, a methodical way to approach this will go a long way in reducing the complexity. As I was saying, a right kind of information architecture which allows anyone to, collect the data, organize it, analyze it, and then create the inferences is super critical, right? And we believe that if you don't have the right information architecture, you cannot get the right AI. So it is that important. Now, there are people who try to do these shortcuts, but they will yield only suboptimal results. Second is, very specific response to your question. The thumb rule that we follow in advanced analytics is it is most cost effective and therefore the smart thing to do to bring analytics close to data, not the other way around. Let the data be where it is residing. In other words, we leave the data to be wherever it is stored, and using the feature functions within the data platform, such as data virtualization, you can pick the data from any source or silo and perform the necessary analytics on top of it without having to move the data around or collect all the data into a central repository like a lake. This is somewhat, a straightforward approach. We have been doing it for several years now. Now, we also see a lot of our customers are beginning to adopt this or appreciate this notion of bringing analytics close to data.